Someone's vehemently ringing the bell. That's a good thing. I like that. Vehement bell ringing. Travis, since you're standing, could you open us in prayer, please, brother?
I certainly can. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us to gather together once again. Lord, we thank you for the message that was just brought and for the learning that we're about to get to enjoy from Jason. We pray that you would bless this teaching and that you would open our ears to hear. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. And Johnny, I think I'm getting just a smidge of feedback, so maybe down just a notch. Testing 2, 3, 4. Mike, how does that sound?
Sounds amazing.
Sounds amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we good? I think we're good. All right. So I had a request to do the charts again from last week. A lot of you were here. A lot of you weren't, though, because it was Labor Day weekend. So the charts are up again. Is that okay? Okay. The charts are up again. This is the redemptive history chart. Believe me, you're going to see this a lot, so don't worry too much. But this is the redemptive history chart. This was the chart that I did on covenant of works versus covenant of grace. All men, remember we said, and we're going to go over this again, in the Adamic covenant, all men were born into covenant with God. God created us into a covenant relationship, covenant of works. We failed. God immediately had grace on us, gave us mercy, covenant of grace. So all men are in covenant with God. They are either standing before God in their own works and failing in the covenant of works, or they're standing before God in the grace of Jesus Christ, purchased by his blood. So all the elect, here's the cross. The cross applies backwards to all those that preceded, and it applies forward to all those that will come until the very end of time. All of those that are on the covenant of grace go up. All those that are covenant of works go down. This was the little diagram on covenant theology, and the analogy that we made, sorry, I know I'm in the way. The analogy that we made is that each of the covenants, the primary covenants, the Adamic, the Noahic, the Abrahamic, the Mosaic, the Davidic, the New Covenant, they all precede the cross, by the way. They're all in the Old Testament. But each of the covenants is kind of like a little lens in a telescope. And with the Adamic covenant, we get just this tiny little look way down the road to how God is going to redeem. But we've got this lens, we get a better view. And then another lens with Noah, another lens. And each one gives us more light and more magnification, if you will, as we're looking at the one event, which is the event of redemption. The final new covenant given in the book of Jeremiah, which is right about here in redemptive history, still long before the cross, but it's right about here, gives us the best look, the most magnification as we look at that through the telescope coming to the cross. And of course, the New Testament then expands on this and basically explains what just happened. And then the book of Revelation is mostly focused on, okay, now that we know what happened, then what? And that was preached to us just this last however many months and months ago. Months and months of preaching. And then this last diagram was the idea of the Adamic covenant. How do you move from Adam to Christ? And we know the Bible talks about you have to basically die because you're born into the family of Adam. You are of Adam. You're born into the covenant of works. So you have to die and be born again into the family of Christ, into his headship, into his lineage. The last Adam is Christ. And we looked at that in 1 Corinthians 15. So those are the charts again. And we do have an idea that we're going to somehow clean these up and print these up and make those much more clear. So that being said, I'll leave that for just a minute. We're going to go deeper now. Last week was more of an overview. But we're going to go deeper now into the Adamic, the Noahic, and the Abrahamic would be my guess is about how far we're going to get. But we've prayed into this. Let's go ahead and flip to Genesis 1. I talked with Maury about this. I said, now, Maury, you know I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Genesis just to do this. He's like, oh, it's great. It's great. It's going to be great, which it will be. So it'll be fun. All right, Genesis 1. Now, in our outline, we're under Adam, all of mankind. If you follow down, by the way, whoops, and look at your outlines here. You've got Adam, which is a covenant with all of mankind. You've got Noah, which is a covenant with all of mankind and creation. You've got Abraham, which is a covenant with a man that has a family, and that family as it becomes a nation. That's the Abrahamic covenant. Then you have Moses, which is a covenant with a people. Maury talked about that, several millions of people, to make them a nation. That's different. And then you have the Davidic covenant, which is a covenant with a king of a nation to reach all the nations and to make a true nation of God. And then you have the new covenant, which is a worldwide nation that spans all of time. Yes, sir? Do you have any more copies of the outline? I didn't do any outlines. I'm sorry. I've got them right here. Shoot. No, this is a little bit expanded, and we could get Spencer or whoever. Sorry about that. Thank you, Robert. As a matter of fact, I have all the copies of the outline, every one of them. And I'm pointing to the outline, and y'all aren't saying anything. Good job, Robert. Very good. Thank you very much. So as you get your outlines, if you'd please turn to Genesis chapter 1. Oh, there's one other review item that we want to get to. A covenant, we talked about the central theme of all the covenants of the Bible. Who remembers the phrase? Central theme of every covenant of the Bible. What's it there for? What's that? To point to Christ, but what was the central theme? That's how it was accomplished after the fall. But God creates man. Yes. Absolutely. I will be your God, and you shall be my people. He beat you. Sorry. Well, yeah. So I will be your God, and you shall be my people. At the very beginning of creation, when he created all things, he created a people unto himself, and he was to be their God, and they were to be his people. And then the fall. But then he restores. And all through the Bible, you see that, and we track that in a bunch of different verses. So Genesis 1:26. Now let's dig into the Adamic covenant here. And let's see. Cody, could I ask you to stand up and be ready to read nice and loud 126, 127, and 128, but we'll stop after each one. That work? Genesis 1, verse 26, 27, and 28. Beautiful. Thank you.
And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth."
Good. Now pause there. Dominion. What does that imply? What's that, Darlene? Who rules?
Dominion has power over, so that would be the people.
Yes. Absolutely. So notice in the Adamic covenant, who's given rule over all things? Man. We rule and are to have dominion over all things. And not just the creatures, but the land, the dirt, everything. It's ours. That's an important concept. Go ahead.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created him.
Great. Image bearer. Talk to me about image bearer. What does that imply? What's that? Likeness. What else? Representation. Very good. So man represents God in the world, in his dominion. Yes? We share his communicable attributes. Very good. We won't go deeply into that, but that's very good. So how are we to have dominion then? Because this shapes our dominion. How are we to have it if we are bearers of the image of God? Like God. So we're to rule it, all things, but we're not to rule it our way, are we? We're to rule it in the name of, bearing the image of, representing to the world God, the true creator. But we are to rule it. And it's both a right and a responsibility, isn't it? And those are two different things. All right, let's go on.
God blessed them. God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. So, a couple things there. Be fruitful. What are we commanded to do? Children. To have children. To increase. To increase. Now that command is given throughout the scriptures multiple times. It's given to the nation, or to the family of Abraham as they go into Egypt, and they change from a family into a nation, the millions of people. It's given as they go into captivity, believe it or not. In Jeremiah, God says, as you go into captivity. And his words to the people were, get married, have children, follow me, and pray for the nation of which you're a part. Even right here, they're to be fruitful and grow, and on and on and on. And we see that that was a command. Now, what else are we supposed to do here with regard to the earth? Subdue it. Excellent. Anybody have replenish? No King Jamesers out there? None. Oh, there we go. There's my wife with her King James. But the idea of subduing or replenishing the earth, what's this? And remember, this is pre-fall. So we're not fixing anything. What is this? What's this idea of replenishing, renewing, subduing? Stewardship. Yes. How? By using what God has given us in nature to do what? For our benefit, for His glory, right? So picture a big old forest with all kinds of growth and this, that, and the other, but then taking that forest and subduing it, clearing out the underbrush for the health of the trees, making sure this, that, and the other. I mean, all these things that man does as man comes into even creation and subdues it. Now, the message that we get all the time is that we're pillaging the earth. We're taking all of its resources, all of these different things. But our God-given command is to subdue the earth in His name, reflecting His values, His glory, for His honor, for our use, but also to husband. Have you guys remember the old phrase, a husbandman? One that's to husband the resources, to make sure that the fields produce and produce well and effectively. And if you remember back as you get further into the Pentateuch, there's very specific instructions about how Israel was to till their fields. They were supposed to rotate the fields so as not to dry out the earth of all of its resources. They were supposed to let them rest and do all these things in order to make sure that this gift that had been given to them, this earth, this entire earth with the fish, the birds, everything, was managed and managed well. A lot of stewardship there. And that actually, like Maury was preaching, there's a lot of instruction there even for this world and the different philosophies of this world, and how we are considered as the interlopers of this world. We're considered the ones that destroy what's natural and make it unnatural. And we take all the resources and we don't, all these things. It's a complete anti-narrative to that. And it's all part of our original covenant with God before the fall. This is what we were meant to do. But as stewards and for His glory. Yes, sir.
Not to derail the conversation in a particular context of this, but I think there's a tension there, right? Doesn't think about this. There's a tension there, like you were saying, between no, we're not destroying the earth irreparably because we have a particular view. That's God's job eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there
God's job to destroy the world eventually. That's true. Yes.
There's a tension between that and then ruining resources and not conserving them well, and so we have to hold that tension.
The idea of stewardship, using them rightly. Yes, very good. All right, Travis, you spoke up, so now you have to read. All right, Genesis, that's not a rule, by the way, so you can feel free to speak up. Yeah, be ready. Yes.
And there's a sense in which we're to cultivate fruitfulness within the earth.
Yes. Yes, because cultivation actually creates more fruitfulness, not less, if done well. All right, Genesis 3. Now, that's part of the covenant given with Adam. So Adam was to have dominion. He was to be a bearer of God's image. He was to be fruitful. And he was to multiply throughout the earth and build this population that was going to serve God. This is all pre-fall. And he was to do it reflecting God's glory and taking dominion over all things. All things. Not just life, not just plants and animals, but the land itself, and to husband it, even as you're sown later. Okay, Genesis 3:15, please.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children. Yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you.
Excellent. So stay with me. So enmity. Where does the enmity get placed? Between what? Between Satan and the woman. And that's there forever. And what that means is it's not that Satan hates women and loves men. No. What it means is that all of population, all of man will forever be in enmity to Satan. Forever. And that's from Genesis 3 on. Now, what is cursed there? Childbearing. So Adam broke God's covenant. Yes? He did. All right. Now remember we said that doesn't mean that a covenant, oh, you broke it, throw it away. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that when you break a covenant, you're subject to the curses of the covenant. Now, God's curse on Adam and Eve was, as if you break this covenant, you shall surely die. But God immediately had grace on them. And what he did was he gave them consequences of their disobedience through covenant curse, but still stuck with what God had commanded them. Now, God had commanded Adam and Eve to be fruitful and to multiply, which means women giving birth. But what God does is he curses that process, and he makes it a process of pain and sorrow and suffering and even loss of life. So he cursed that process, okay? But it was still there. Go ahead and read 3:16. Oh, sorry. Let's look at the head and heel part. So somebody talked to me about the head and the heel, and let's all flip to Romans 16. Verses 19 and 20. What's this heel and head part? We've all heard this a million times. Steve, what is it? Who's going to bruise whose head? See, I put you on the spot. And I told you yesterday I wouldn't do that. I'd have you read. Fair enough. So, Satan will bruise our heel, but we will crush Satan's head. Now, lest we think for a second that the Adamic covenant all ended with Adam or ended in the Old Testament, let's read, who can read Romans 16 for me? Who's got that? Anne-Marie, do you have that? Nice and loud.
For your obedience is never small, that I rejoice over you. But I want you to be wise as to what is good and innocent, as to what is evil. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The God of our Lord Jesus Christ.
So what you see there is Paul in the Epistle of Romans which, by the way, is another wonderful, Maury just touched on this briefly, this idea of recreation. Romans is a wonderful epistle about the gospel and being born again in Christ. But here at the end, he's alluding to the Adamic covenant all the way back to that wonderful promise that there will be a time when Satan is crushed under our heels. So this has not gone away. It has not gone away. It was accomplished in the cross. It will be finally accomplished in the new heavens and the new earth. Just wanted to point that out. Yes, Travis, you had something else to say, or no? You're good. All right. Where were we? We had you 3:16, please.
All right. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth, and pain you will bring forth children. Yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you.
And that last bit, that last phrase, what does that introduce?
Headship.
Rebellion against headship. Remember, the headship was established because the woman came from man, and it was all good. But what's established here is that natural relationship of husband and wife was then cursed with tension, sin, rebellion, fighting. All right, and then 3:17 through 19. Go ahead and read the last, all the way through that.
Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. But thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, until you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So what was cursed? The land. The land itself was cursed. And who did that impact primarily? Adam. Because what was Adam's job? To subdue it. To have dominion over it. So what this says is, before the fall, Adam was supposed to subdue this earth for God's glory, to be God's image bearer throughout, to husband these resources. And what's mentioned immediately in the following verse? What's going to fight against him? Thorns and thistles. It's all going to fight you back. And how is he going to do this? What does it say descriptively? Toil. By the sweat of your brow. Some of you guys have that. What you were commanded to do has not gone away. But what you were commanded to do will now be sorrowful, painful, dangerous. It will be a labor all of your life. But you still do it. So I want us to get that in our brains, because the covenant, a covenant defines relationship. A covenant defines relationship. So just by way of example, Mike Long and I just pretend we've never met each other, but then we become neighbors or something like that, and then I go over to Mike, I say, hey Mike, my name's Jason, we're neighbors. You know, we've got this little segment of land that's between the two of us or something like that. Let's do this. Let's draw up an agreement and say, you get to use this land this time of year, I get to use this land this time of year. And then that way, we'll know who gets to do what on this land. And then he signs it and I sign it. So we've just created or codified an agreement. And what that does is that forms a relationship between me and Mike Long. Because now he's a party to an agreement that I'm a party to. Now with that agreement would come rights of transfer. So what would happen if I sold my land and somebody comes in and buys the land? Now do I still get the rights to that land and so I can show up? No, I've sold those rights to somebody else, which means that the rights travel with the land. And same thing for Mike. So that's defined. What happens if Mike comes into the land when he's not supposed to come into the land? Consequences. What's that?
My great-grandfather actually did.
He got shot or he shot somebody?
No, his neighbor killed him.
Oh my goodness. Well, see, there you go. So that wouldn't necessarily be a life or death covenant, not maybe in Texas. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
That analogy works between you and wife.
Yep.
The difference is these covenants were not between equals.
Yes, they were not. So we haven't gotten to that part yet. What Neil said is the difference is that these covenants were not between equals. And that is huge. But we haven't gotten there yet, so sorry. It's all good. But that's important, because these are covenants of God with men, which, by the way, just since we're on the topic, there is no religion ever that anybody has ever found where God covenants with man like he does in the Bible. Because God actually covenants with himself several times to promise us something. The religions that you see everywhere, wherever there's gods, a god, multiple gods, whatever, it's all about man trying to do something to gain the favor of the gods or God to get what man wants. Very different dynamic. But we'll get to that, because that's a great point. All right, so that's the Adamic. The last thing I wanted us to see there is that the Adamic covenant has not been negated. It was cursed. All of the commands of the Adamic covenant and all of the rights and privileges are still there, but they were cursed in the ways that we talked about. And that continues on as well. Yes? Are you still mad at me for getting in the land, or?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I recall that these covenants have an accompanying sign,
What's that?
an accompanying sign of the covenant, like the rainbow, like circumcision. But I can't remember what's the sign of the covenant of the Adamic covenant. What's the sign of the covenant?
It's a good question. Does anyone know? I actually don't know. Not sure that it had one.
Now you have some homework.
Yes, I do. I'll write that down. I'll look for that. The covering of the body, Noah says, when he killed the animals and gave them loincloth or gave them coverings. But I'll look at that.
Was it blood of the animal that he actually killed?
Well, I don't know that it was.
Because it was made before the fall.
Yeah, because the Adamic covenant was before the fall. I think Palmer Robertson would say that by giving Adam life itself, that was the blood component. Because Robertson's whole thing is a covenant is sovereignly made by God, sealed in blood. I paraphrase that, but that's Robertson's, O. Palmer Robertson's. But I'll look at that. Thank you. All right, let's go on to the Noahic. The Noahic covenant. Let's go to Genesis 6. Genesis 6. So the covenant made with Adam here, and then moving forward. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and erase all this, because I want us to capture some of what Maury was even saying in Genesis. Because the way that this is all written is really important. So if you remember that little diagram that I had up there, all of redemptive history. So you've got Adam here, blank, Moses, and then Joshua and Judges. Now the reason why, so normally when I write that redemptive historical thing out, what I'm showing you is it's the journey of the promised land, the promised one to come. It's basically the genealogy of Christ, from Adam all the way out to the cross, and then God's covenant people, etc. But it's all about the people. But now I'm showing it in a slightly different way. Adam was here, the beginning of all things, but we don't have any scripture written until Moses. And every story that you read in Genesis happened but it wasn't written down. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years here, and depending on who you talk to, thousands of years. Nothing written down until Moses. So there's a couple, obviously God had his reasons, but there's a couple things that are easy to point to. God started writing when he had a nation, when he had millions of people. Now, you've got the Pentateuch written right here before the death of Moses, or during the time of Moses, when he's got the people wandering around in the wilderness and heading into the promised land, but before the promised land. So you've got Moses writing about all of this. But the intended audience, these were written in the context of a people ripped out of Egyptian culture that had been nurtured there for 400 years. Now you think about 400 years. That in the United States, that takes us what? Back to the 1600s. To the 1600s. And these people had been living in Egyptian culture with Egyptian gods. And they came in, by the way. This is interesting because this is another little Exodus type moment. Like they came in and then they went into Egypt as the family of Abraham, I think 100 or so. And they came out a nation of 2 millions, 3 millions, 4 millions, whatever it is, depending on how you handle kids. And then they moved on. But Genesis was written for this people here. And what it does is it tells them where they came from. And it defines who God is. And that's important because they were living in a multi-God, there's the God of the river, God of the frogs, like Maury was saying, which was everywhere at the time. Nobody had a single God. And God certainly wasn't all-powerful over all things. That was not in the culture at this time. And they were in this polytheistic milieu and about to go into this promised land of even worse. So it was written for these people to understand where they came from, how they related to God, capital G, and what they find in the covenant of Adam was they were special. They were created in the very image of the God who they find out now is all-powerful and has always existed and is over all things. And there's only one. And I'm made in his very image. And I have responsibilities. All of creation is my dominion. But I'm to rule it in his name, for his glory. Oh! All other gods are false gods. And they learn that in Exodus. So all of this is revealing covenants, promises, relationships created by God with his people. Yes?
I think another interesting point on that, maybe wrong on this, but in the land of Egypt, the Pharaoh was the one that intervened between the people and God. So the covenants that they were dealing with, it was an indirect connection to their gods. But I think this is a reminder that Moses' writings is a reminder that God, in a sense, humbled himself and came as an equal to make covenant directly with his people, as opposed to this indirect through someone, through your king, or through someone in authority over you. So even though there is that, even though God is, it's a covenant between a holy God and an imperfect people. So there's a not equal sense there. There's actually an equal sense in that he came directly to the people.
Great point. Good observation. Great point. Now, there's another question, too. How powerful is this God? Let's get to Genesis 6, 15, and 8. Nathan, since you spoke, I told you that's not a rule. You guys can speak. But Nathan's also got a good, loud voice, especially when he stands up and does it. 6:18, and then we'll do 8:21 through 22.
Genesis 6:18.
Yes, please.
But I will establish my covenant with you, and I shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And then 8.
So what that is that's God telling Noah, I'm going to establish my covenant with you, and I'm sending a flood. So the covenant predated the flood. Go ahead. And then 8 is after the flood.
Okay. What were the verses in 8?
Sorry, 21 and 22, please.
And when the Lord smelled the pleasant aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done.
And then 22.
While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Excellent. All right, stay with me, because we're going to take you to 9. Who's God talking to? What's that? Who does he say he's talking to? Himself. And who is he covenanting with? Himself. He said to himself, I'm not going to do this again. And we're about to see him make another big covenant with himself, with Abraham. But he says to himself, I am not going to do this again. And that seed time and harvest, summer, winter, all of that, day and night, none of it will cease. And now we know until the final time. So all of that will continue. God covenanting with himself. Okay? That's important. Let's go on to 9:7. So God, in chapter 9, God starts to flesh out more of the Noahic covenant and what this is all about. Go ahead.
And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it.
Where does that come from? The garden, the Adamic covenant. Again, it didn't go away, right? So you've got the Noahic covenant. It's a bigger lens, but we're reaffirming what preceded. So Noah, be fruitful and multiply. Keep going. 9, 8, and 9, please.
Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth.
Excellent. Who's the covenant with? It's every living creature on the ark, and who else? Go to Romans, by the way, chapter 8. Not you, Nathan. Who else is the covenant with? Romans 8:19 and following. Chris McAllister, could you read that for me? 8:19 through 22.
For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God.
Who waits? All of creation. Go ahead.
For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now.
Perfect. So the picture there, and you develop that out. If you have a question, ask me. But the idea there is that all of creation was cursed. Remember the thorns, the thistles, everything that Adam was supposed to do in creation was cursed. And it was fighting back, and it was all these things. But when the new heavens and the new earth are created, all of creation is also redeemed and restored. So again, here's this Noahic covenant, the Adamic curse. It's all flowing through. It's all flowing through the entire redemptive story. It's not lost, it's cursed. Not lost, it's cursed. Okay, we're in Genesis 9, 8, and 9. Who does it go to? The seed. It goes to sons and daughters after you. So it progresses. Okay, let's go to 9, 10 through 12, please.
And with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark, it is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by water of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I made between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and when it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth.
Thank you. Excellent. So we have the parties of the covenant. We have God. We have his people. We have all of the generations that follow. We have all of creation are encompassed in this covenant. God speaks to all of it. He will preserve it all, even through the curse. And then Mike Long, what's the sign of our covenant?
Rainbow.
Rainbow. There's your sign. I know I haven't answered your question. I'll research that. Yes?
Well, he has answered the Adamic covenant. Would it be death?
Is a sign of the covenant.
Actually, I want to correct what I said. I think the sign of the Adamic covenant was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because that covenant is a covenant of works of perfect obedience. So the symbol of perfect obedience would have been to obey God and not eat of the fruit of the tree, which was the sign of the covenant. They broke the covenant by eating the fruit of the tree.
But it was also, they were cut all from the tree of life.
They were, yes. Good, interesting discussion that we will move on to Abraham with. Okay. Very good. All right, let's go to Genesis 12, 1 through 3. So what we see, Genesis 12, 1 through 3, we see a covenant, Adam, with all of mankind. And then we see him cursed. Quickly, yes.
Covenant with Adam is still in effect, correct?
Yes. I erased my chart. The covenant of works, yes. It's either satisfied in Christ for the elect, or it's not satisfied and all men are cursed. Go ahead.
The covenant with Noah is a different covenant.
It is a different covenant. It's a development of the covenants that God makes in pointing to redemption.
Wouldn't it be just an extension of the covenant of Adam?
It's a development. It's further magnification of where God is going to redeem his people. Yes. All right, Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Tim, could I have you read that? Genesis 12, 1 through 3, please.
The Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Excellent. Thank you. So what happens to Abraham? Where is Abraham? Which is ancient Babylonia, Syria area, kind of eastern. Takes him western. What happens though? What is being done here to this small family who we read just in the chapter prior? We read about Terah. We read about this long lineage. There's this big genealogy and all this stuff that he's part of, and then he's called out. So what's being done with Abraham here? He's being pulled out. Very good. Out of paganism, he says, which is true, but he's also being pulled out of this lineage that he's part of to be made something new. Now, also, from a purely pragmatic standpoint, how would this resonate with the people that were just pulled out of Egypt?
They would not seeing Abram as blessed of God because he was not part of that group.
And expand on that. Talk about the pulling out and all that.
Well, it mirrors what it happens in the New Testament, that Jerusalem was disobedient and the Jews were disobedient, and they all went to the Gentiles to bring in a larger group. Here, the people of God are outside of those who came out of exile with Moses. So that would have been very odd for them.
And you got Abraham, at this point Abram, being pulled out of family, kindred, tribe, and nation, all of his people, to a nation, to an area, geographic location where he's not known. And that could be extremely dangerous because you were then prey for the locals. So, what happened to Abram's wife, right? He was always afraid that his wife would be taken from him. He was pillaged, but that was the fear. So that's the idea. And that would resonate, I think, with the people that were under Moses being pulled out of this great and mighty nation. Egypt was a great and mighty nation. And then you pull them out, and they don't know where their food's coming from. They don't know where their water's coming from. They don't know how to get their clothes because they don't have the fields to raise the whatever or the sheep to, all that stuff. And here they are on their own, milling around.
It also points to the sovereignty of God in that they were passive, both Abraham and the Jews were passive in their redemption and in their being taken out of the land. Moses represented them. They had nothing to do with it. They just followed the directions they were given.
Another good observation. It was done to them. They were pulled out. Very good. All right. Now, what else was promised? That they would become a great nation. That was promised to them. They were going to be given a land. And they didn't have a land at the moment, so that was promised to them. They were going to be a blessing to other nations. And they were going to be blessed. And they were also given the promise of protections. Yes, sir.
Aren't these verses not at the beginning of the essence of I will be your God, you will be my people?
Aren't they what?
Aren't these the essence, the beginning of I will be your God, you will be my people, these three verses?
I wouldn't say the beginning, but they're definitely fleshing it out, because this is God saying then to Abram, here as a family, I will be your God, you will be my people, and it's in a special way, because up until this point, all the covenants were given to all men, or to all creation, through Adam or through Noah. But then you get here a particular family called out that are given particular covenant blessings and promises. And they're going to be a new nation. A nation with blessings, a nation that will bless others, and we'll see more of that as we expand it. Genesis 13, 14 through 17. Let's see. Who have I not picked on? Nikki, I have not picked on you. Genesis 13, 14 through 17, please.
The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you.
Now at this point, remember, Abram hadn't had any kids yet. And he was getting older. And so was Sarah. But he's still getting this promise. Let's go to 14, 18 through 23. Rachel, would you read that for us? 14, 18 through 23.
who has delivered your enemies into his hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord, the God of Sodom, possessor of heaven and earth, lest you should say, I have made you rich.
Excellent. So who's talking here?
The king's son.
Melchizedek. At the beginning, Melchizedek is talking. No, that's fine. Priest of the Most High God. Now we see in Hebrews who Melchizedek is. He is a priest outside of the priestly system. He predates it all. But it's a priest appointed by God. Now we don't get a lot more detail on this except in the book of Hebrews and then one of the Psalms. But the important part here is that he's recognized by God's chosen, Abram, as a representative of God to him, not in a theophany sense, but just as a representative appointed to God. And what does he say Abram is in verse 19? Possessor of heaven and earth. Now, what covenant is that from? The Adamic covenant. So here is the lineage of Adam and Noah, and the God, the high priest of God, looks at Abram and says, possessor of heaven and earth. And what's happened? Verse 20. I know we've skipped the history on this, but we know it. What's happened in verse 20? Abram's been saved, right? He conquered the enemies. They went to battle. Abram went to battle with other kings, and they conquered the enemies. But credit is being given to Abram in this victory. And so there's a promise also fulfilled, shadowing other conquering victories that will come. But there's the Abrahamic covenant being fleshed out. Here is your victory. And then why won't Abram take anything in verse 23? What does he say? God would be his sole provider. Now remember, what does Abram possess? The heavens and the earth. So if I possess the heavens and the earth and all things in them, given me by God, he won't take anything from someone else lest God's glory be besmirched. And say, well, everything that Abraham has was given him by God except for that sandal. Or except for those sheep. Or except for. So faithfulness within the Abrahamic covenant there. But you see it start to be illustrated and fleshed out. And again, this is going towards the people under Moses. They're starting to understand this special relationship that they have with God and how they came into being. How they came to be this nation that was pulled out of Egypt. Mitch, could I ask you to please read Genesis 15:6 and then 8 through 18, please? 15:6 and then 8 through 18.
15:6. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
Now that verse is quoted again in Romans. And it's quoted in Romans chapter 4. And Paul says, look, Abraham believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness. That preceded Abraham being circumcised, which is the sign and the seal of the Abrahamic covenant. We're getting there. And then what Paul is showing there is that because Abram's faith was reckoned to him as righteousness before the sign and the seal of circumcision, before the division or what have you, Abram is then father of all nations. That's the argument in Romans 4, which I don't think we'll get to today. But go ahead, Mitch, with 8 through 18 in chapter 15, please.
But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it?
Okay, so stop there. Abram has it. He has the covenant. And God's proven it out. God defeated his enemies. God's taking him to the land. He's getting rich. He's, all these things, but he doesn't have children yet. So there's this moment of doubt, this season of doubt, which is also where the Mosaic people are. They're sitting in the wilderness. It's like, whoa, Egypt's over there. Everything that we had came from there. Now we're here. Who's going to provide for us? How are we going to, what are we going to, all these things. So then God gives him this to help him. Go ahead.
So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all of these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Adam drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there.
That's Egypt. So we just learned
Egyptians gave them stuff, gave them wealth, gave them things. They went out almost like a conquering nation in a sense. But you, however, to go to your midst of the sea, be serious and a good old day. In other words, Abram won't see it. And we see that in Hebrews chapter 11. Abram lived his life in faith as one that didn't see the fulfillment of the promises, which in a sense is how we live. It's also how the folks under Moses lived. How you doing over there, by the way? Good. Okay, all right. We're hanging with the group there.
In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. The sin of the Amorites does not yet reach its full measure. You spoke every time. For the sun has set, the darkness has fallen, the smoking fire pot will blaze forth tears and pass to the sea. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give you this land. From the Wadi of Egypt to the great river of the Euphrates.
No, you're good. Thank you. So, who went through the animals? God went through the animals. Who else? Nope. Nobody did. God made covenant with himself. Now, it was to the benefit of Abraham. He says, he goes through these animals and then separated. The idea of that, for those that may not have heard this before, the idea of that is that if I break the words of this covenant, so may this be done unto me. In other words, split me apart, I die. That's the end of me. But God, in the manifestation of his force, or however it's translated in the Bible, it's pillar of fire, whatever, goes through those animals himself to seal this promise that he's already made, that Abraham knew he had. Remember, Abraham hadn't had kids yet, and he's supposed to be a great nation. Abraham said, how do I know? So God promises with himself. It's called the self-maledictory oath. In other words, all of the malediction goes on me if I do not fulfill it. Now, what's amazing about this, and this is discussed in Hebrews as well, God is eternal, so the covenant never goes away. Usually a covenant, if I make a covenant with Neil, it goes away when I die. Marriage, but that's before it happens. But God's eternal, he never goes away. God can't lie. So this has to be true. And God is always faithful. So when he makes the promise with himself, it's an eternal covenant, unbreakable, binding forever. Fulfilled in Christ, ultimately fulfilled at the end of time. So all of this is for Abram understanding, for him to have a greater confidence in the promises that were given to him. And by the way, the people under Moses, as they've been pulled out of the land of Egypt. Now let's not stop there. Let's pick it up a little bit as we go. More is coming. More is coming.
saying that a little confused. If man does not hold up his end of the covenant, is God saying, may this happen to me, and then therefore it happens to Christ, and he what we need to do? Or is it only God's? Is it only saying if I don't fulfill my end of the covenant?
It's only God. If he went through the animals himself. So it's the image, it's a sign of God's faithfulness, promising to go to his faith. I think that's the thing you know.
Praise God. Praise the Lord. Thank you for the point that you just made several times last year that will return, sovereign, providentially caring for, providing for until all eternity. The covenant that you made with the people, I will be your God, and you will be my people. The eternal covenant that should bring incredible peace and comfort to us. No matter what we go through in this life, the trials, the heartaches, the tragedies, the joy and the fun, all of it. Let's always keep our eyes on you, Lord. That the covenant you made with us